Andy Farrell names his British and Irish Lions squad tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, we will know the 2025 British and Irish Lions squad. Over the last 2 weeks, we have been going through position by position, trying to narrow down what Andy Farrell likes in a player, what he wants from a squad member, and who we think critically will go, will play, and who will miss out. Because there's going to be some big name exclusions.
And we landed on these guys. This bunch of rugby players are who we decided not that we would take, but we think are the people that would suit what Andy Farrell likes in a rugby player. And there are a lot of moments where there were things that we would probably disagree on. There were omissions we had to make that we really like as players, but we wondered whether Andy Farrell would like them. And today I think we're going to question a few of those and whether those still stand.
We are going to, because a lot has changed in the last 2 weeks, finalise the squad we believe Andy Farrell will name tomorrow. We're going to try and finalise this. We will do a live stream tomorrow as we react to the squad, as we look over it, as we try and break it down and analyse it live on the spot. However, in the meantime, I think we should run through the 38 players we've selected. The belief is Farrell is going to select 37. The last few tours, Warren Gatland said initially he was going to pick 36 for 2021, he picked 37. And then you go back to 2017, he said he was going to pick 38 and he picked 41.
Yeah.
The Lions coach almost always picks more than they say initially, so it's believed to be a 37-player squad. I think it'll probably be 38. That's our first bet.
And once we're off the back of that, we are going to select who we think will be the captain.
Yes.
Who Andy Farrell will likely pick as a captain out of that lot when we finalise it. So, first off, should we run through the initial team we've selected?
Let's do it. So, at loosehead, we believe Farrell is going to go for Ellis Genge, Andrew Porter and Pierre Schumann. At hooker, Jamie George, Ronan Kelleher and Dan Sheehan. At tight head, Finlay Bealham, Xander Fagerson and Will Stewart. These are just in alphabetical order. They're not in preference or choice or anything at all.
The second rows that we initially believe Andy Farrell will go with are Tyke Byrne, Ollie Chesham, Mauro Itoje, David Jenkins and Joe McCarthy.
And the back row, perhaps the most controversial selection of all, we've gone for Ryan Baird, Tom Curry, Jack Morgan, Van der Fleer, Jack Willis as the flankers we think Farrell will take, and then Jack Conan and Caelan Doris as the number 8s.
At scrum half, Jamison Gibson-Park, Alex Mitchell and Thomas Williams.
Whilst at 10, Sam Prendergast, Finn Smith and Marcus Smith, both Smiths.
At centre, we've gone 3 Irish, 2 Scottish. Bundy Aki, Robbie Henshaw, Hugh Jones, Sione Tuipulotu and Gary Ringrose.
And the back 3, last but very much not least, Tommy Freeman, Mac Hansen, James Lowe and Dylan van der Merwe as your wingers, then Hugo Keenan and Blair Kinghorn as your fullbacks. So, this is the squad over a few weeks of breaking it down, of looking at these players in depth, looking at the statistics, looking at their performances, looking at Farrell's model for each position, what we believe he is going to go for. However, a lot has changed in the last 2 weeks. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each position and nail down who we think finally is going to be in that squad. I'm going to begin with loosehead. Generally, what Andy Farrell likes in a loosehead is a big carrier.
Yeah.
He wants someone who gets back off the ground quickly and makes lots of carries. It's not about the meterage they make, so much as the number of carries they get through. And Genge, Porter and Schumann all fill that role perfectly.
Yeah, above that as well, it's a bonus if they can be a breakdown threat.
Yeah.
He likes somebody who will really slow the opposition's ball down. There are jackal threats who are more there to pinch the ball throughout the pack, but in Andrew Porter in particular, who Andy Farrell has worked with Ireland, he likes that he disrupts the opposition ball. He's a big distraction in the breakdown.
Yeah.
As well as that, he quite likes his loose head to be the destructive
Yes.
scrummager. The tight head, which we'll come on to, he quite likes to hold up the scrum. The cornerstone of the pack, to make no errors, to not move backwards. The loose head prop is who he likes to be a nuisance around there. Andrew Porter, as we touched on before, often gets talked about for the fact that he's quite a wobbly scrummager.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't always go straight. He's not necessarily always legal.
They're not looking for a legal scrummager, they're looking for a destructive scrummager.
Yeah.
I think all 3 of those fill that mould perfectly. If you look at Nicky Smith, who's perhaps the next cab off the rank, he is perhaps has the bonus areas. He's a great jackal threat. He's a perfectly good carrier, but he doesn't have the raw getting back up to his feet and carrying. I think these 3 fit the mould best and are probably the best 3 options available.
I agree. Should we move on to hooker?
At hooker, Hooker's an interesting one because what I think we've gone for is not the three best players, but the three players who fit the game plan the best. Andy Farrell likes his hooker to be an edge forward, to play on the wing. We often see Dan Sheehan play that role, but when he was injured, we saw Ronan Kelleher come in and do that. That's what he values, is someone who can hang out wide, who is a runner rather than a carrier, who plays the ball more in those wide channels.
I think Farrell's often easy to interchange, potentially a back like an inside centre. We've seen Bundy Arki step up to be like an extra forward, as you were, and substitute that for Dan Sheehan, who is as quick as a winger, is a proper back, plays, as you say, out wide, isn't too interested in having them in the middle of the field. That is so, the contentious point that we said about this was the third hooker spot, so to speak, because you look at Dan Sheehan is probably at the moment the favourite to start the tests.
Yeah.
Jamie George has to be on the plane for his leadership, and he's an outstanding, experienced Lion. And the third one, I think, was a toss-up for us between Ronan Kelleher and Dewi Lake.
Yeah.
And the thing that edges it is he's not interested in his hooker being a middle forward.
Yeah.
He wants them out wide. He wants them making a difference, right?
So potentially, if Dewi Lake came in, they would be asking one of the number 8s, potentially a Conan or a Doris, to go out and fill out on the wing, and Lake to fill in as the main number 8 carrying spot in the middle, which is what he does incredibly well. He's essentially a second number 8 for your team.
Or they'd be asking Dewi Lake to do a role that doesn't suit him whatsoever.
No, you don't get the best out of him, you don't get the best out of the team.
He's the wrong player for that role.
Yeah.
So are we happy with our selection of Ronan Kelleher?
I think so. I think Lake has a shout because I think he is in the top 3 hookers in Britain and Ireland. However, I don't think he fits what Farrell wants in a hooker.
The job's to win a test series.
Exactly.
And in terms of continuity, if Dan Sheehan picks up an injury or gets substituted off, Ronan Kelleher's your man, isn't he?
Absolutely. At tight head then, Finlay Bealham, Xander Fagerson, Will Stewart. This was a tight call anyway, and we said at the time that Ty Furlong not having much time back from injury hurt his chances. However, that has changed entirely because Xander Fagerson has picked up an injury, and he was ruled out playing for Glasgow a few weeks back. They said it would be a 10 to 12 week injury. 10 weeks the day he got the injury is the Lions' second game. So there's a chance he's back in time. There's a very good chance he'll be able to play some part in the tour. However, he won't be fit before then. He won't be fit to take part in training. And beyond that, he can't play the Argentina game, which is something we'll come back to very soon.
The 10-week bit isn't necessarily the bit we need to focus on. It's the to 12.
Yeah.
If he gets ruled out any further, he's missing potentially half the tour. And the thing is, in a tight head prop, as we said earlier, he likes the cornerstone of that pack, and Andy Farrell loves a tight head prop who hits rucks, who gets up off the floor and will speed up his own breakdown ball for his scrum after playoff. Now, Xander Fagerson, out of the 3 guys that we've got listed here, is the perfect prop for that role.
Out of everyone available.
Out of everyone available, he is the perfect Andy Farrell tight head prop because he has the highest work rate both sides of the ball, and he doesn't really go that far backwards scrum time as long as he has a decent loose head alongside
Do you have a role for the tight head as well as a distributor? They like them to step into the first receiver and play the ball out the back, or potentially get involved and make decisions
Something
themselves.
Fagerson is excellent
Look at those
at.
tip-on passes. Yeah, Fagerson's very good at that. Will Stewart's very good at that. However, I think Fagerson's injury, and you don't want to be in a situation where even if he's only at the first 2, maybe 3 games, you're having to play the same 2 tight heads every single round. I think we're probably looking at Ty Furlong coming in for Xander Fagerson.
I'm gutted to agree with you.
Yeah.
Because the way you've got to think about this is if somebody gets injured, it's not a risk to call up Xander Fagerson.
Yeah.
However, it is a risk to take him and then send him back home.
Yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to scribble out Xander Fagerson's name and put in Ty Furlong.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the second row. This was a really difficult one to select. So we went for what I think would go down quite controversially in David Jenkins taking the last spot there. Now, the reason why we did this is because when we looked at the stats of rucks hit, carries made and tackles made, this Six Nations, Dav Jenkins, surprisingly, despite playing for quite a poor an extremely poor Welsh team who shouldn't have many players on this tour, he was right up there with his individual statistics alongside the 2 big dogs, the 2 people who are most have a foot on the plane, Tyburn and Maro Itoje.
Yes.
He was right up there with those guys, even though you wouldn't necessarily say he's as good a player as a Joe McCarthy, an Ollie Chesham, or a Courtney Laws, who we've left out. Some would say a James Ryan, who we've left out. A lot would say a Scott Cummings or a Grant Gilchrist that we've left out. Yeah. George Martin is out injured. He's going to miss the entire tour, so he's sadly not in consideration. Where do you stand currently on that Jenkins selection and anybody else potentially around that?
James Ryan had a real chance to nail himself in over that semi-final and he missed the game. So I think that reduced the chances of him pushing his way back up. However, he is due back in the next week or two, so he will play before the tour. It's not like Xander Fagerson, who'll be out until the tour begins. I think he's got a very good shot because Farrell knows him, right? And one of the factors, the elephant in the room of this entire tour, that when it comes to selection, no one is talking about, is the Argentina game. That takes place on the 20th of June, which is just 6 days after the final of both the URC and the Premiership. They have said that no players who play in that game will be considered for the Argentina test. At the minute, of the squad we have here, if we imagine that the final is between Leinster and Glasgow of the URC, who are currently right at the top of the table, and Bath and Leicester Tigers, who are at the top of the Premiership, only 16 of these players will be available to play in that game. So that comes majorly into consideration. You can't geography six players into that team. We saw last time out, because of those limitations, Warren Gatland called up Ronan Kelleher to be the 16th man or the 24th man. He was the travelling reserve for that game in Murrayfield against Japan. He then got called up later in the tour. However, can they afford to do that with a full bench? That raises one question, right? Which is, do they need to look at players like Dav Jenkins, who won't be in consideration for those games, who definitely won't be playing in them?
Weirdly, the fact he plays for a poor team has gone in his favour here.
Yeah. However, the other side of that is, if you do need some guys to come in and sit on the bench, having not trained with the squad, having had maybe 1 or 2 sessions, having come in with 4 days' notice, you want Leinster players because they know the system inside and out. They know the style of play that Andy Farrell is most likely going to implement with the Lions. They've been playing it since they were 12 years old, right? And so I think that becomes a major factor, is it favours players who aren't going to be coming from those 4 clubs that make the final, and there's quite a few clubs that could still be, or you want Leicester players, and it might be those happen to be the same thing.
So at the moment, are we thinking that Jenkins selection is something that Andy Farrell would still do?
I think he stands there pretty well. George Martin probably was there if not.
Yeah.
However, I am still leaning towards keeping Dav Jenkins in.
Okay.
I think we could see James Ryan though.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. As you say, it's just somebody that Farrell knows very, very well. And even though he's not been on the best form this Six Nations, we know what he's capable as a rugby player.
The other question, though, is we currently have Ryan Baird as a back rower, because I think there'll be a hybrid play between the two. Do you move him over and take a different back rower? Do you play with the complexion of the squad?
I think we've seen in previous Lions tours, both with second row, back row hybrids and utility backs, there is always one that has to go on tour because it's such a convenience, particularly in midweek games. Someone pulls out injured, you know who you can slap straight in. Ryan Baird is taking up a very unique spot there because he plays both of those equally well. And I think there was a bit of a toss-up between him and Courtney Laws. Now, we asked previously whether Courtney Laws would get that release in time from the Pro Day Deux. Since we recorded that, the chairman of Brief has said he will be available for the tour. So Courtney Laws is somebody that's very much in consideration. And it becomes a toss-up of, do you want the exuberance of Ryan Baird, or do you want somebody who's been on 2 Lions tours before in Courtney Laws?
And someone who knows the system in Ryan Baird.
That's very true.
That comes in as well.
But also a very mouldable player who knows lots of systems in Courtney Laws.
Something we've overlooked as well is that Mara Toje, Tyke Byrne, Ollie Chesham and Dav Jenkins are all capped in the back row. All of them have played 6 at international level. Joe McCarthy is the only one who hasn't.
He could do a job there as well.
Yeah. So, do you go, well, we've got 6 covered, we need it, and yet 5 lock still feels light?
Yeah.
You still feel like you need an extra player in there. And I think the complexion of the squad, how he balances that 38, is really interesting and comes into another question that I don't want to too far ahead on, but I think there may be a 1 fewer back going than we've got here as well.
Yeah.
And may sacrifice that to put Baird in and perhaps take another back rower.
Baird, of course, I mentioned Laws there. The other one being Chandler Cunningham South, potentially, is a 6 by trade, but was put on the bench in the Six Nations as a lock and did a good job.
Did a great job.
So that's also a possibility. Let's go through the rest of our back row now, actually, because we'll put a pin in Ryan Baird. He may get sacrificed later on here. But there are 2 standout huge, let's say, elephants in the room here. One of them is Ben Earl, the outstanding Ben Earl. You phrased it in the last one that Ben Earl is 100% one of the top 3 back rowers. If you were picking...
Possibly. Top 3 or 4.
If you were picking a test team based on sheer performance, you would probably put Ben Earl in there based on form. However, Your question was, where would he fit into the Andy Farrell mould? Where would he fit into that system?
I don't think he does. I don't think he does. If you break down what he wants from each back row position, and I think they are individual, you have the 6 role. He generally likes a line-out jumper. He likes someone who's their main defensive jumper and is an option on attack, makes a lot of tackles, covers a lot of ground, and hits a lot of rucks. Often uses that other edge forward on the other touchline.
That is a big part of the reason why Ryan Baird plays more at 6 for Ireland,
Yeah.
whereas he came through as a lock at Leinster and got shifted straight to the back row for Ireland because he likes a tall, rangy number 6 who will steal opposition ball on lineouts.
Ryan Baird is quicker than James Lowe.
Yeah.
Like, he beat him in a 100-metre race.
Yeah.
Like, that is the level of pace we're talking about. He's quicker than an international winger. He really works as a 6 in the Farrell system. The 7 role is slightly different because they like the 7 to carry a lot. They like them to be getting up, and meterage is great if they get it, but really it's the volume of carries. It's getting back up to your feet and carrying.
And it is that relentless chop tackle that they like off that. Everybody else, you can make big shots around the park, but it is the chop tackle that opens up those jackal threats. And he likes that 7 to be a jackal threat himself, to pinch the ball most of the time. You see Van der Fleer does it really well all the time. You see Jack Morgan does it really well all the time. I think those two, I can't see him not taking on the
Those two are pretty nailed on. Jack
his
Morgan
DNA.
is, I think, one of the safest shouts in the Lions squad because he's Wales's best player. I don't think he will not take a Welsh player.
Yeah.
I think that's too controversial a move. When Jack Morgan fits the mould of what he wants in the 7 absolutely perfectly. His rate of getting back up the floor is, alongside Caelan Doris, the quickest in the world.
Yeah.
Quagga Smith, Jack Morgan and Caelan Doris are the 3 quickest at getting back up the floor in the world of any back rowers, any forwards.
The other elephant in the room, so to speak, before we decide on Ben Earl, is in this spot here. I'm pointing at Jack Willis. So we said on our back rowers video that we think Jack Willis is competing for the same spot as another certain English back rower by the name of Henry Pollock.
Yes.
We have this week watched Henry Pollock absolutely empty himself into Leinster and has caused a bit of a stir. A lot of people are saying Pollock has to tour now. The thing about Henry Pollock and his performance is I think he's made a lot of people forget that he only has 1 cap, and that's a good thing.
Sure.
That he's performing so well at club level. Let's face it, Henry Pollock would be the form pick in the back row.
He would. The interesting thing about the performance from Pollock was the first 10 minutes, there were moments, and this was the highest intensity game he's ever played. Like, with all due respect to Wales, that was a higher intensity game, playing Leinster than playing Wales in a test match. And he said as much afterwards. He said that was the hardest game he'd ever played in. And the first 10 minutes, I think you could see that get to him. You could see him blowing a bit. He gave away a really stupid penalty.
Yeah.
And then I think he kind of grew into the game. And the moment he scored that try, the entire game turned for him. And he was absolutely everywhere. And he was phenomenal for the remaining hour of the game. And he was up there as one of the best players on the pitch in a game which was just electric and brilliant and at the highest possible intensity you can play at club level. He showed he's a test-worthy player that day, and he overcame any errors and any faults anyone had in his game. There is the odd silly penalty. And previously, the thing I raised in the previous video is he'd have periods where he ducked out the game. And there were periods where he wasn't carrying as much, but he was still probably making big tackles. He contested basically every breakdown. He won a brilliant, completely illegal turnover at the end, which I don't think comes from him knowing when to cheat, as is one of the key skills of a 7. I think what happened there was he just goes for every breakdown because he's got so much energy. He's just battery's always fully charged and he charged in for everything.
That's the thing that impressed me about Saints at the end of that game is it would take 1 penalty for Leinster to be able to equalise the game if they went for the points, or indeed to give them an advantage, another opportunity at scoring. Saints contested every breakdown in the bravest way possible, and it paid off because he got that turnover. And the thing that 7s often learn, it's much the same as tight heads actually, they often learn in their mid-20s, rather than Pollock only being 21 years old, is how to get away with playing the ball on the floor, essentially. And it's something that Pollock is already outstanding at. As you say, I think it is just sheer energy that he brings and just sheer exuberance of just going for everything. And, if you throw enough shit at the wall, some of it will stick, right? And I feel like he does a bit of that with his breakdown, and he's not penalised that much. A lot of the whole Pollock narrative is recency bias, but let's face it, that's part of the selection.
It's form,
as I say, it's form that you have to take that into account. Jack Willis played on Sunday for Toulouse against Bordeaux, and I think he was very good. I wouldn't say he was exceptional. He got a couple of turnovers, made a couple of huge carries, but I wouldn't say he had like a big highlight reel moment like Pollock did. So Are we agreed that they're still going for the same spot, Willis and Pollock?
I think they are.
I think they are.
So if we look at the rest of the back row, Tom Coe's nailed in. He was one of the best players in the Six Nations.
Yeah.
Josh van der Fleet is Farrell's guy. He knows him. He trusts him. He's the mould of that 7 role. Him and Morgan are pretty much nailed in as that kind of player, right? I think they're going for the same spot unless you add one extra back rower and you sacrifice a back, right? And I think we saw this weekend Henry Pollock jump ahead of Jack Willis.
I think I agree with you. I think Henry Pollock, as you say, it's the exciting pick, isn't it?
But you also have to take into account Jack Willis might not also be available until the 3rd game because he plays for Toulouse, who are probably going to make the top 14 final, and that would rule him out until the 3rd game. Because
especially now they don't have Europe to play for anymore.
Yeah, that game is on the day of the 2nd match. So
okay, so let's say, because also Northampton are unlikely to make that Prem final as things stand, let's say Henry Pollock is going to jump ahead of Jack Willis for that last flanker spot.
I think so.
Number 8's wise, so Caelan Doris, I think we're pretty confident will go.
Yeah.
Jack Conan, I'm pretty confident will go because he's Andy Farrell's guy.
I think Talupa Falatau has an outside chance of going ahead of Conan.
Or Ben Earl as a number 8 is an option as well.
Yeah. There was a rumour that Jack Conan had ruled himself out. It looks like that isn't the case because he gave an interview the other day where he said he'd love to go on the tour. So it looks like that isn't very much not the case. I would back Jack Conan to be the other number 8.
Yes. So one thing that we need to talk about number 8 as well is the role in attack in Farrell's system. He likes both out of his number 8 and out of his blindside flanker, somebody who is capable, who is versatile, capable of playing both as a middle forward and as an edge forward, just in case the system changes and so you can play it a little bit on personnel or even change it on the fly. You've got people in the back line who like to come in and call shapes themselves, somebody who works in both those roles. We know Doris can do that. We know Conan can do that. Yeah. The thing is, obviously, if you pick Ben Earl, he is somebody who I think is capable of that.
Yeah. As is Falatau.
Yeah, a part of, as you were saying, it's difficult to know what role is nailed down for Ben Earl because he's kind of a jack of all trades in a way. But does that atone for a Ryan Baird or even the Willis Pollock slot, do you reckon?
I think Conan is going.
Yeah.
I think he's too reliable, he's too safe, he's too good an option to leave at home. The question mark is, do you take someone else?
Yeah.
Because there's a bit of me, if we move on and we're happy with a back row selection, if we're dropping Pollock in.
Yeah, so we're going to drop Pollock in for Jack Willis.
Yeah. Are we happy with Ryan Baird as that hybrid player?
Oh,
he was superb off the bench at the weekend.
He was.
He was one of Leinster's strongest
always
players.
is.
And he showed the impact he can have. Because people get caught up in the starting 15 for the tests, right? There's a very good chance that the bench, instead of going for who is the 3rd best lock, they go for which lock is going to bring the most impact off the bench. And I think of all of these locks, it's probably Ryan Baird. Yeah. I think he's got a very good shot being the number 19 in the tests.
It's a really good shout, because I'm going to pose you 2 questions now. If you were picking a test team, and you had to pick one of these 2 at number 6, who would you go for? Ryan Baird, Courtney Laws?
Ryan Baird.
Really? I thought you were going to say Courtney Laws, because I was then going to flip that and say, if you had to put one of those at number 19, who would you put?
Courtney Laws.
Really? That's the opposite way round to what I would have said.
I don't think Laws fits the 6 mould. I think he fits the 2nd row, which is great line out forward, aggressive, gets off the ground quickly, covers a lot of ground, distributes and can play the ball, and really hits hard in defence, like it leads the line in defence.
You think he'd bring more impact off the bench than Ryan Baird?
No, I think he fits the 2nd row role better than Ryan Baird.
What about number 20 jersey?
Number 20 jersey, it probably is Baird.
Yeah.
It is Baird.
Yeah. What about the number 4 jersey? It's probably Courtney Laws, isn't it?
Possibly.
Like, there's so many combinations of this conversation that we're having. So, right, I think for the time being, we'll back our decision and go with Baird. As much as I think I'd pick Laws, but this isn't me, this is Farrell. And the thing is, he has worked with Courtney Laws before.
Yeah. But I think there will be as many players as possible from that Leinster system. Yeah. You look at when Farrell took over with Ireland, and it basically took them 18 months to get up and running in that game plan. There were like a year and a half of them playing a version of it that was sort of working, and they could beat teams like Wales and Italy, but it wasn't taking them past the Frances of the world, who were, even then were just establishing themselves as the Galtier. I think he knows that his system is incredibly intricate, and it wants players who know it inside out in the key positions. And 5 is one of the key positions because it's the first distributor. And I think there's a lot of players who can play that role, but we might see him lean on those players outside of guys who'll be there the entire time. He wants players who'll be there the entire time to learn the system and be there in advance, or Leinster players who know the system and Ireland players, the likes of Byrne, who can play that system easily.
To play devil's advocate, we've got a 50-50 between a Leinster player and a player in the Pro Day who will be available, definitely, for that Argentina game.
Yeah.
We're sticking with the Leinster player who might not be available.
I think so.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah.
Scrum half. So, we had an interesting discussion before we started recording this. Jamison Gibson-Park is nailed
He's
in,
there.
right? Alex Mitchell is the second best scrum half available to Gibson-Park.
Had a superb game at the weekend.
Yeah, and Thomas Williams we took as the next spot just above Ben White.
Yeah.
Because he brings something slightly different, and he, as we went over, slots into that first receiver mould a little bit better, probably has a slightly quicker pass than Ben White. Because what Andy Farrell, for us, wants from a scrum half is somebody who will get the ball to the fly half as quickly as possible. Not necessarily just quick to the breakdown, not somebody who necessarily snipes. That's not something Andy Farrell's very interested in. It is how quick can he get there and move the ball from on the floor to the other side of the pitch.
He's a rugby league background. It's a dummy half in rugby league, right? Where the job is to get it up and out. They are not interested in sniping because that isn't really a thing in rugby league.
Gibson-Park obviously is the perfect scrum half for this. He's the matador of the Irish team. Thomas Williams has a really quick pass on him, is really quick off the ball. But the thing that I think we overlooked in our previous video on scrum halves is Alex Mitchell. It's tough to see where he fits into that mould.
Farrell's mould. And I think it's interesting because I think he is in the top 3. I would definitely take him. However, the question is, does he fit it better than Conor Murray or than Ben White, who I think are the next 2 there?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would rule Murray out. I don't think Farrell will. I think he loves him. I think he's very much keeping him in contention. Again, Craig Casey fits that mould, but I come back to, if Craig Casey was going on a Lions tour, he would have had more game time for Ireland by now. He wouldn't be behind Conor Murray still.
But Georgie Horn?
George Horn's an interesting one, but I think I'd stick with these 3 scrum halves.
I think I would.
But it is an interesting wrinkle, is that Mitchell doesn't fit the mould.
I think Mitchell has enough money in the bank and is a good enough and clearly coachable enough scrum half, considering how Borthwick has transformed him from just this snipey 9 to somebody who kicks the ball incredibly well. I think he's a good enough 9 that Farrell will look at him and go, I can work with this kid.
I think we'll see Alex Mitchell go, but I think we might not see his best because he's not going to play a game plan that suits him.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. Okay, so we're going to stick with those 3 scrum halves. They are the 3 best available, I think. So, with exception to maybe Ben White over Thomas Williams, but I'm happy to stick with Thomas Williams.
Fly half. This is the interesting one. This is the big one. We talked for about an hour before, and we cut it down to 40 minutes that went out. And my thoughts have changed since.
Yeah.
Right. So we went with Sam Prendergast, Finn Smith, and Marcus Smith, and we left Finn Russell out.
We didn't leave Finn Russell out.
We
predicted that Farrell might leave Finn Russell out.
The job of a fly half in an Andy Farrell system, and this is something that's massively hurt Jack Crowley over the last few years, is to manage the attack, not the game. He's not interested in you managing the game, managing the clock, managing the whatever. It's can you run the system? Can you run the attack? Farrell teams are so system-led. We've got a plan that works in all these areas, and that will win you 90% of games, right? And people are getting really caught up on the 10%, because those 10% often tend to be the most difficult games. They are the quarterfinals, they are the semi-finals this weekend, they are the finals. They are games in which the opposition change their entire game plan in order to play knockout rugby. Farrell's teams haven't done that. They've traditionally stuck to the same structures, and therefore the fly-off has played the same way, and they haven't looked to game management. People are bringing up Finn Smith's game management because he was superb at the weekend. He was absolutely fantastic. And yet, I don't think that's what Farrell likes in a 10. Sam Prendergast is the elephant in the room. Although he's not the elephant. The elephant in the room is generally something people aren't talking about. People are just always going, look, there's an elephant with Sam Prendergast, right? Because his defence is very poor. Yep. However, his attack management is his real strength. That's the thing he's extremely good at, and that is why Farrell is favoured.
He's a great 10 for this system.
Over Jack Crowley, exactly. Yeah. And there comes this question of they lost a semi-final, right? Leinster did, and Northampton were absolutely brilliant, but Leinster still did bottle it. And does that affect selection?
So in the lead up to this, I spent all week thinking, I think he might only take 2 10s.
Yes.
And I think the sacrificial lamb there is Finn Smith, because he's the least experienced player. Then the game on the weekend happened, and you kind of go, well, Finn Smith's too good. And people are just talking about him as a Lions 10. But I agree with you. I think who suits the system best? It's Sam Prendergast out of these 3. It's Sam Prendergast. Yeah. Who suits the system second best? Probably
Smith.
Marcus Smith. I don't know. It's hard to tell though. But I think Marcus Smith is a talented enough player, and he covers a different position as well, that I would keep him. And unfortunately, I think that means that Finn Smith's chances are damaged. But
I want to throw two things out.
Okay.
Right? One is people are bringing in Sam Prendergast's performance at the weekend, right? And I don't think it's relevant. I think all of those Leinster players, Farrell's already made his mind up on. I think there's a few of the Northampton players, namely Pollock and namely Finn Smith. Tommy Freeman was already there. He was already sorted regardless. But there's a few of those Leinster players who've boosted their chances. I don't think any Leinster players hurt their chances. You go back to 2023. Leinster bombed out in the Champions Cup final, was really far ahead, and then lost to La Rochelle, and then played Munster in the semi-final of the URC and lost, bottled it again. Crowley kicks a drop goal to win the game, and then Munster go on and win the URC. And you would think he would go, oh, I need to pick more Munster players because they're performing at a higher level. They're winning tournaments. They're winning knockout games. He didn't. He went, these Leinster players know my system. And in the wider World Cup squad of 44, he picked 8 Munster players and 23 Leinster players. He picked as many Ulster players who finished much lower down the pecking order as Munster players. Like, I don't think he's fussed by this. He goes, these players know the system. They play the system. They are perfect for what I want. And therefore, I will stick with them. I don't think the weekend hurt Sam Prendergast's chances in Farrell's eyes at all, much as it will have in almost any other coach.
again, what Andy Farrell likes in a fly half, we spoke about attack management. I spoke before about the 9 getting the ball away from the breakdown. In a pair of halfbacks like Gibson Park and Prendergast, because their pass, the pair of them, are A, really disguisable, that it's really difficult to read their body language and know where they're going to pass the ball at any given time, and B, they both had such fast and accurate passes on them. You can have the ball about 40 metres away from the breakdown, from where that ruck was, in about 3 or 4 seconds, which is ludicrously fast. It's so difficult to defend, it means you're always switched on. So, for me, I do think that really works in Prendergast's favour. But the thing we have to talk about is Finn Russell.
Yes.
Because he also has that passing ability.
And was also
that really
brilliant at the
works.
weekend.
Yes, he was. But I don't think his performance on the weekend was relevant, once again.
Sure.
I think that if Finn Russell goes on this Lions tour, it's not because he played well at the weekend. It's because he's one of the best 10s that we've ever seen, potentially, in international rugby. Even if he played bad at the weekend, it wouldn't have been relevant.
We come back to how many fly-offs go, and I think that decides the question. Andy Farrell has typically only picked 2 fly-halves. If you go back over every squad he's picked for Ireland, every campaign, the only times in which there's been 3 or more fly-halves selected, every now and again you get a second fly-half coming off the bench when Sexton was still the first choice. In that game against Fiji or Japan, they play less than 15 minutes, right? And you can kind of discount that if that's the case. Generally it was Harry Byrne getting kind of 10 minutes at a time. Generally, the only times in which he's had 3 or more fly-halves playing in a campaign, it's never been full, is when there's been a changing of the guard. It was when Joey Carberry went out and in came Jack Crowley. It was when Jack Crowley went out and in came Sam Prendergast. It was when Kieran Frawley came in and Ross Byrne dropped out. Generally, that has been the case. It's been when there's been a change, when someone's switched over. He likes to stick to 2 fly halves and they eat up all the minutes. Generally, it's 1, but he'll have 1 there as a backup.
Yeah.
And so, is he going to select 3 fly halves? And all 3 of those are really different players.
Yeah.
And so what I think
that's too much of a risk.
I think it is. I think we're going to see 2 very similar fly halves go. And I think he might only lean on 2 with someone else who can cover, possibly Blair Kinghorn. Yeah. However, him missing that Argentina game becomes a problem. It's mathematically possible that both Quins and Northampton end up in the final. It's unlikely. However, there's a good chance Prendergast will be missing there. But so will Russell, because Bath are almost definitely going to be in that Premiership final.
Yeah. So, I think that is the mitigating factor of bringing a 3rd fly half.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to have to sadly cross off Finn Smith.
I think it's Russell. I've changed my mind on this.
I think it's Russell. Because I think, going on what you were just saying, they usually have 1 fly half who does one thing and another one who does something slightly different, but is capable of doing the same thing, right? I think that's Prendergast and Russell. Now, the big question is, and this isn't a big question at all, who is a better rugby player, Sam Prendergast or Finn Russell? It's Finn Russell every single day of the week. Nobody is debating this. Like, you know, we've both copped a lot of flack in the last couple of days for saying Prendergast is good. Not world class, not a world beater, good.
He's an international standard rugby player.
Yep, he's only lost 1 game of Test rugby so far. He can survive at international rugby, right? It's just not a conversation, just grow up, right? But that is it, I think. that Prendergast and Russell will be the two who are the matadors of that attack, who can fling the ball halfway across the pitch in 2 seconds and shock a defence. And then, because those two could be unavailable for that Argentina game...
As will Kinghorn.
As will Kinghorn. He brings Marcus Smith as the third option.
I think so.
And I think at that point, it's a bit more fair because you have 3 first-choice players for their country. And Finn Russell's world-class. Like, I would hate to see him miss out.
Yeah.
And... yeah, I think he has had that discussion that we were on about before. I reckon there was a draft version of Farrell's squad with no Finn Russell in it. But I think the logistics, thankfully, because I think Finn Russell is one of the best fly halves in the world, work in his favour.
We are the only people taking Finn Smith out of our line squad this week.
Yes, we are.
And yeah, I agree with you. I think
not
it's Russell,
performance-based.
And I think Smith goes and he may end up playing fullback. I think there's a chance that we may change the complexion of his back three and he ends up playing fullback a lot. He's covering 2 positions. I think he's there purely for logistical reasons. I think he might be the 38th player.
And he's just too good not to take.
Yeah.
Marcus.
I think it might be you've got the 37 otherwise, so he's going to take 2 10s. Then you've gone, well, we need one more for logistic reasons, and that will be Marcus Smith.
Also, the thing that we are underestimating is Marcus Smith plays the game plan he's given. And he's come across as, when you look at clips of him talking in interviews and coaches talking about him, he comes across as the most coachable player that people have ever worked with. That he
Eddie
used
Jones
to just be...
Eddie Jones said he was maybe the most coachable player
He used to be a highlight reel player, and now he is a game managing 10. And a lot of people
forget that.
Yeah, leave that in the past because the player he came through as. But he's such a completely different player. And the thing is, we are talking about Prendergast and Russell as the 2 front runners, even though Marcus Smith, again, is a much better player than Prendergast is, but it's about who runs this attack, who runs this machine, who can press play on that. But Marcus Smith, you can give him any system and he will run it bloody well. He's one of the best 10s on the planet at something like that.
I'm in agreement.
Cool.
Centre.
Yes.
So I am happy with this.
Yes, there's a lot of familiarity with these. Obviously, the Scottish partnership is the most established partnership, maybe in World Rugby as far as centres go, and then he's got the 3 Irish boys in here. Now, what Andy Farrell really likes in a centre is something of an all-round rugby player, right? Somebody who can do the job of all the forwards that we went on about earlier, who reloads and gets up off the floor quickly. But also, somebody who could do the job of a fly-half or a back 3 player that we're going to come on to. Somebody who can sit into the boot and organise pods around them, but is equally good at running a hard line off a forward, who can fill into any missing pieces that are around the game plan. Or someone's on the floor, someone's still reloading, somebody's slightly out of position. Yeah. Do you look at Bundy Arki in particular, is very good at this. He's equally good sitting in somebody's boot for that ball in behind as he is playing the ball himself, as he is running that hard line to tie in another defender. It's something he's exceptional at. It's something that Hugh Jones, I imagine, will do very, very well because he is such a good hard runner, but also when he has time on the ball, he attracts so many eyes towards him. There are 2 question marks here. I think we're pretty much willing to stick with them, but one of them, Robbie Henshaw, weirdly, everybody's telling us that he's the worst player in the world for some reason. I think Andy Farrell will look at him and go, I'm happy with him.
He's reliable, he's solid, I don't think he'll make mistakes.
He's been on 2 Lions tours.
Exactly.
I think that goes a long, long way.
And Sione Tuipulotu, who has been injured, could play this weekend coming up, should be back by the end of the season, however, hasn't played a minute since the first weekend in January.
Yeah, and we did this hard discussion on the centres video of, is he good enough that him not playing rugby counts in his favour?
I think the answer is yes.
The answer is yes, for us. And we think for
happy.
Farrell, more importantly, that he's a good enough player. He's world class.
The interesting wrinkle, I think, is that Fraser Dingwall fits the mould of what Farrell wants in the centre, which is someone that can run hard, can act as an extra fly half, etc. Much better than Hugh Jones does.
Yeah.
And so I think his chances are disproportionately good. And yet, you also look at it and you go, well, Stuart McCloskey fits that mould better than Gary Ringrose, but Gary Ringrose is a better player, so he's just made it work. And so I think...
there's enough of a gap in terms of quality as a player, isn't there?
I think Hugh Jones will go.
Yeah. So we'll stick with these 5 centres.
We're happy with those centres.
I really hope Sione makes it.
We move on to the back 3. And we are looking at Tommy Freeman, Matt Hansen, James Lowe and Duan van der Merwe as our wingers. Duan van der Merwe looks like they're hoping he'll be back before the end of the season. It looks like he is going to miss Edinburgh's 2 remaining regular season games. He might make it back if they make the knockouts.
Yeah. So to look at what Andy Farrell's role is for a winger, there's a lot to this. So with a winger, Andy Farrell quite likes an auxiliary fly half. Yeah. You look at James Lowe, often comes in as first receiver and feeds forwards off him. Matt Hansen loves sliding into the boot of those pods. They both create things around them in very different ways. He likes a creator and a finisher as his wingers. The interesting thing is, if you look at the wingers we've got up there, I would say 3 out of 4 of them fit that mould. The other one is Duhan van der Merwe.
Yes.
But it once again goes back to that question of, who is the best try scorer of those 4 names on there? It's Duhan van der Merwe. What's the primary role of a rugby player or a winger generally? It's to score tries.
Sure.
So with that in mind, the other option is Darcy Graham, who, let's face it, would suit that mould a little bit better than Duhan would.
I still don't think he quite fits it. I think he's a very different player. Tommy Freeman, we did see when he was playing in the centre, which also is an option, like he can come in and fill in a 13 there. He did play that role of being an auxiliary fly half a few times when he was playing against Wales in the Six Nations, so we know he can do it. He has it in the locker. I've never seen Darcy Graham do it. I've seen him pop up at first receiver a couple of times, but generally he's run himself.
Yeah.
He's very rarely popped up and distributed
loves to have a
for someone
crack.
else. Yeah, he doesn't have that kind of vision where he's looking at that. He's looking for holes for himself. Likewise, Duhan van der Merwe, and I don't know why would you ever use him in that role. However, I do think you have 2 wingers, right? And if you've got centres who can come and play that role, and potentially you have a fullback, because Keenan has been doing that role for Ireland very well, and Kinghorn is an international fly half.
Yeah.
He's played 10 at test level. He's played 10 for Toulouse. I think you can afford to have a winger in Duhan who does that. The bigger question is his injury concerns.
Yeah. With that in mind as well, similar to what we were saying about centres, he likes a fullback who can run everything, who can, who can look up and see a little bit more than the fly half can. The fly half's got to worry about catching the ball. That's the hard bit. The fullback can look up and see everything that's in front of him. Yeah. He also quite likes, because one thing we didn't mention about scrum halves is a contestable kicking game off 9. He quite likes it that the fly half can kick a little bit longer, and other players, which we'll come on to, can kick a little bit longer, but the scrum half kicks contestably. He likes back 3 players who are really good under the high ball as a threat.
And a huge boot on them.
Yes.
James Lowe being the model, he wants outside of the 10 at least 1 big boot in there, right? And this is where Osborne's chances jump as well. Lowe, I think, fits that mold perfectly, obviously. Blair Kinghorn, likewise, has a big boot on him. Tommy Freeman, decent enough, pretty big boot,
yeah.
like that counts. However, is that firepower in there if Lowe gets injured?
That is the thing. Kinghorn? So, the biggest thing I can say in favour of Jamie Osborne here. So, there is one outlying factor in this backline that really works in the favour of Jamie Osborne. Out of every single name we've got up here in the backs, there is only 1 left-footed player, which is James Lowe. So, Andy Farrell loves to have a left footer in his starting backline. James Lowe is usually the guy that he goes for. But the other one that he has in his locker is Jamie Osborne, who kicks that. Obviously, we've got Tyg Furlong and Tyg Byrne are both left-footers, but ideally he won't be liking to use those in the pocket. But James Lowe is that guy who typically, if they're on the left-hand side, he will put in the pocket and he will whack the ball long. If James Lowe isn't there, that is half of his exiting game plan gone down the pan. Yeah. Not even any of the scrum halves can do that, can take on that role. Thomas Williams, I have seen kick off his left foot before. It's not ideal forcing someone to go off their wrong side. Same with Finn Russell. So, is that too big a factor? Because Farrell loves his systems, both in attack, defence, and with exiting. It's one part we've not talked about enough, and James Lowe is the centre point of how Ireland like to exit. Is that too big a factor to not pick Jamie Osborne as your backup?
I think Marcus Smith's eating that spot, though. I think you need 10 cover more than you need that.
A left foot.
I think you're looking at that game against Argentina as it's such an element that's blown this whole tour selection up a bit, because they need to be able to field the team.
The other option, of course, and Andy Farrell could totally do this, get rid of one of these boys for Henry Slade.
Yeah.
Another left footer.
Yeah.
Whose left foot is massive. Because Andy Farrell is so anal about that.
Yeah.
You know, we looked at on the last tour, Warren Gatland only picks jumping back row forwards, right? Andy Farrell will not budge on, I need a left footer in my back line. It's just something that there's no budging on it, right? So there is a chance he drops off a Henshaw or even a Tuipulotu for a much less experienced player in Jamie Osborne because of which side he kicks off.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. The other option is, does he go, well, we've already stretched 38, do we take 39 and put Osborne in? I don't know.
We're doing this as a prediction. It's very risky for us to do that.
Yeah. I think 38 is what my gut is still saying.
Yeah, I agree.
There's only 8 games on this tour. 39 is a lot of players to get through. And also, do you want, if you're bringing in someone as a utility player to play a bunch of positions, do you want them to be missing for that first game or two? I don't know. The other thing is, and we forgot this when we did the talk before, and it was raised by a couple of people in the comments, there is an extra fullback cover in their centres. There is someone that can play every position. There is a utility back in there.
Tom Jordan.
It's Hugh Jones.
Hugh Jones.
Hugh Jones is capped at fullback and capped on the wing. And he's played 12 for Scotland. People forget this. I forgot that he could play fullback.
Yeah. Him and Sione have played the other way around before for Scotland.
Yeah, they did for a while.
Yeah.
For Glasgow as well. They played the other way around when they first came through, or Sione first came through.
Yeah.
Hugh Jones and Robbie Henshaw can both play fullback. So that throws up.
Robbie Henshaw probably
well.
can't these days, because we remember what happened last time he played there.
It didn't go well.
Yeah.
But if you're playing a midweek game against,
You get a yellow card or something,
Yeah.
you can work around it.
Likewise, Freeman can play fullback, Hansen can play fullback, Lowe can play fullback. I think we've got cover there. Does that change the Marcus Smith conversation and say, do you want Osborne there?
Again, this is an insane thing to be saying, because this is Marcus Smith we're talking about, one of the most talented players in Britain and Ireland. But it is just how much Farrell values what he likes in an exit.
This is too difficult. This is too hard. How's he making this choice? The other option is, does he take Osborne, leave Smith out, and just have a couple of players, including Smith, there for the Argentina game?
I think if he wants to scratch the itch of Smith, he will want him.
Yeah.
And we know what Marcus Smith's like. He will prove that he's worthy of having around. He's a leader.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if we are hypothetically entertaining this Osborne debate, I think the player that you sacrifice, rather than an extra one or Marcus, I think it's one of these centres.
Do you think?
I think
then who goes? Hugh Jones?
Maybe Henshaw, maybe Hugh Jones. It's so hard to decide. Maybe Henshaw, because, again, it's just another Leinster centre, but it's the one who starts over Osborne.
Yeah.
So it's such a difficult thing. But, yeah, I don't know. It's difficult.
I think these are conversations that Farrell and the rest of the coaching staff are having. I think another factor, again, is the fact that the only Scottish coach on the tour is the forwards coach, John Daziel. And therefore, is he going to fight for Finn Russell, for Sione Tuipulotu, for Hugh Jones, for Duan, for Blair Kinghorn? Or is he only going to be fighting for Grant Gilchrist and going, he's my line-out guy, I love him. We put him in ahead of David Jenkins, who doesn't have a representation. The only Welsh coach on the tour is Aled Walters, who has never worked Wales.
Never worked Wales. Right? He's avoided Wales like the plague.
He left the Scarlets before any of these players came through. Any of the Welsh players in contention here, Jack Morgan's the only one who played for the Scarlets, but it was before his time. Aled Walters left.
Of course, the other option, I guess, if we really want to shoehorn Osborne in, is you get rid of Ryan Baird, or you get rid of Henry Pollock. But I think there's too much riding on those two selections.
Yeah. You can't have that for your back rowers.
No, you can't.
You need to be able to select at least two full.
So back to the Baird debate. Are we sticking with him?
Oh, it's so difficult. Okay. My gut says he's going, but it also says Jamie Osborne's going.
My guts. I can just see him getting a call just more than I can see Courtney Laws getting it.
Yeah, me too.
So I'm going to stick Ryan Baird there instead of Courtney Laws.
Yeah.
Now it's a shootout between a second row forward and a wing fullback centre hybrid. It's Ryan Baird versus Jamie Osborne for that 38th slot on tour, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it is a question of, what does Andy Farrell value more? A 6 who can steal opposition ball, who is rangy, who is rapid, who works as an edge forward primarily, but can also slot into the middle? Or does he value a left footer who knows the system and can distribute?
I don't think they're in competition with each other, because they're both system players. They're both there to run the system. What he's looking at is one of those players that doesn't fit the system. And that might be Duan van der Merwe.
Yeah.
And it might be that Duan van der Merwe misses out and Jamie Osborne goes instead.
That would be cruel, wouldn't it?
Should we stick with this team?
I think we stick with this team.
Time?
Yeah. If that is what happens, that is why.
Yeah.
If Duan van der Merwe misses out for Jamie Osborne, you know why that is. It's for his left foot.
The other thing is, we bring this up with Fagerson, we bring this with van der Merwe, we bring this with a few of these players here who are carrying injuries. James Ryan, he will have people in contact every day. He will know their situation so much better than we
Sione,
do. Yeah. We are going off quotes from coaches at least 3 weeks old for most of them. So we don't know. We don't know. I think there's also a good chance that James Ryan goes instead of Dav Jenkins. But I'm going to stick. I'm going to stick here. We are going with our final squad of Ellis Genge, Andrew Porter, Pierre Schumann, Jamie George, Ronan Kelleher, Dan Sheehan, Finlay Bealham, Will Stewart, Tig Furlong.
And in the second row, we've stuck as we begun with Tig Byrne, Ollie Chesham, Mauro Itoje, David Jenkins of Wales, and Joe McCarthy.
In the back row, Ryan Baird, Ryan Baird, Tom Curry, Jack Morgan, Josh van der Fleer, and Henry Pollock, with Jack Conan and Caelan Doris as our number 8. You also have a lot of number 8 cover there. You know, Morgan, Pollock can both play number 8. Curry's played there as well.
Jack Willis, the one to miss out from there. And of course, Xander Ferguson ruled out probably with injury from the tight heads earlier. Scrum half, we've got Jamison Gibson Park, Alex Mitchell, Thomas Williams, exactly as we selected before.
Sam Prendergast and Marcus Smith remain in from our fly halves. However, we've swapped Finns and gone for Russell instead of Smith.
Yes, which I feel very good about. Centres,
yeah.
We've, once again, I'm getting all the ones that we've stuck on, not made any changes on. We've got Bundy Arkey, Robbie Henshaw, Hugh Jones, Sione Tuipulotu, and Gary Ringrose. No Jamie Osborne yet.
But back 3, we've gone Tommy Freeman, Mac Hansen, James Lowe, Duan van der Merwe, but I do think there's a good chance he misses out. I think there's a good chance Osborne goes instead, and I think it would be Osborne instead of Darcy Graham. With apologies to Darcy Graham and the people of Scotland. Then Hugo Keenan and Blair Kinghorn, who we didn't really talk about, but I think we're nailed on as the fullbacks.
Yes, so before we talk about our captain, I think the overall reflection of this, right, we have gone very heavily in the direction of what will Farrell like in this player? What does he need? Rather than necessarily picking the best 38 players. If it was the best 38 or the best X in their positions, right? Because if we were just looking at that, you'd have Duan on the plane for sure. You'd have Darcy Graham on the plane.
You'd have Dewi Lake.
You'd have Dewi Lake. We would never have thought twice about the Finn Russell thing. But this is what Andy Farrell might be thinking about. We're trying to get in his head, and we can't because we are not as intelligent about rugby as he is. However, the one other position that he has to pick is a captain of this squad.
Yes.
Now, there are a few names that stand out here. So one of them, I think, is Dan Sheehan, a guy who captained Ireland a little bit in the Six Nations, is one of the talismanic players for this Irish team.
And is probably the most nailed into the test team of any player in this entire squad.
He would be really great because I feel like he's not that much of a confidence player. You know, he's not somebody who, if he throws a dodgy line out, which never happens anyway, he starts beating himself up. I don't think he's that kind of a player. I think he's a definite candidate. One thing we should, of course, talk about is what Andy Farrell likes in a captain.
Yeah. Generally, I think he goes for an almost football-style captain. It will be a talismanic, it will be one of, like, the best player.
The centrepiece of the team, isn't
Exactly.
it?
Right, he often picks someone who is the standout player rather than a standout personality. He's not like you look at Warren Gatland in the past, right? He made Sam Warburton captain who was 22 years old because he fit a personality profile of what he liked in the captain. I don't think Andy Farrell would do that. I think instead what he does is he looks for experience. You look at the players that have filled in when there has been a need for a backup captain for Ireland, right? It has been Dan Sheehan, as the safest name in the team, is a form player in that Ireland team, the Six Nations. It has been Gary Ringrose as the most established safe head in the team. It's been Tig Byrne, it's been James Ryan, players who are nailed into their position. It's generally a star player rather than a personality type. And therefore, I do think it's going to be arguably the best player in this entire squad, someone we haven't really talked about in this video, Caelan Doris.
Yeah. I think the other thing is he likes an aggressive, competitive leader.
Yeah.
I think Andy Farrell's the sort of coach who sees captain as an on-field responsibility, rather than often with Lions captains, like a big part of why Sam Warburton got it is because of the off-field stuff, is that he's really good at managing his players. He's really good at setting standards off the pitch. But I think Andy Farrell knows he's got a team, including his coaches, who can deal with that between them. And Caelan Doris,
massive leadership group.
Yeah.
Like, you've got players who, look, Genge is captain England. Like, bloody George is captain England, Sheehan's captain Ireland, Bealham's captain Connacht, like, Furlong's captain Leinster and Ireland.
And that's just the front row.
Captain, like, Jenkins is captain Wales. Like, you can go through this entire team and there are captaincy options everywhere.
Another one that we should talk, in fact, I think there's 2 or 3 that we should just quickly talk about whilst we're here. So Tig Byrne, as you mentioned, has captained before.
Yeah.
Outside chance of, some coaches like to do the thing where they give it to somebody who's not their national captain, and I think Tig Byrne's a really good runner for that. Mauro Itoje
is the other front runner.
He has assumed the England captaincy. Jamie George we've glossed over as well, with the fact that I think if Jamie George was still the England captain, that would weirdly help Maro Itoje a little bit. I think if not for the fact Dan Sheehan's in his way, Jamie George would be a really good shout for that. But as we say, I don't think Farrell wants a squad captain. I think he wants an on-pitch captain.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it will be Jamie George. I think he will have much greater leadership responsibilities wider on the tour.
The other massive outside bet is he goes, I want someone who can knit the squad together instead of someone to make it feel like a separation of like, there's the Irish players and everyone else. So he goes for Jack Morgan.
Yeah.
As someone who is from outside that group of the dominant English and Irish team here.
However, on the same logic that we previously omitted Finn Russell, I think he will look at Jack Morgan's win rate as captain and go, I don't think that's good enough. Yeah. And so I think he will admit him on that basis, which I think is quite fair.
I think he'll end up captaining midweek game.
Yes, I agree.
Think he's looking at
yes, I agree. As I think Sione Tuipulotu, if he goes, will. But I do think, I think none of the rest of these backs look at particular captain roles. Obviously, Finn Russell co-captains at Scotland level. But I do think that out of all of these that we've just mentioned, the standout name is Caelan Doris. As you say, he's the centre point of this team. He is an aggressive leader and he is so competitive. I think there's a lot of comparisons between him and Andy Farrell.
Yeah.
I think that they lead in similar styles. They have to get everything that they want. Much the same as another member of the coaching staff in Johnny Sexton. I just think that Caelan Doris is the guy who will, when they're under the sticks, will give them the kick up the arse when they need it, and when things are going well, will make sure that they continue that and set that standard.
So, we are anointing Caelan Doris as our captain. We have reconvened quickly 2 days after recording that previous video, as about 10-15 minutes after we finished, it was announced that Caelan Doris had picked up an injury at the weekend against Northampton and may miss the tour.
Experts say this is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
And so we thought we would just throw on the end here our thoughts on this, how this changes the situation, what this leads to. Is he still a captain? Do you still take him? Do you still name him in the initial squad?
If there is any chance that he can play in the test, yes, you put him in the squad.
Yeah.
Think of the last tour, and I know that the last tour didn't end happily, but Alan Wynne-Jones gets ruled out in the first game, and they're still well, he's still the captain, even though he had to fly home from there.
And he pulled off a miraculous recovery to get back and captain the Lions in those tests.
I think Caelan Doris is that level of good that you still name him in the squad, even if his injury rules him out for a chunk of the tour. You probably can't name him the full-time captain, is the thing.
That's the thing. Because I think he is in the squad regardless. I think you probably do still name him as captain because you're waiting on that news, right? We probably won't know any news about it until after the squad has been named.
Do you think they will then name a secondary captain, like
Possibly.
a vice-captain beyond that?
The other thing is, does it just sway it to Itoje? If the decision is probably currently 70-30 in favour of Doris, with Itoje as an option, you then have got, as we mentioned, Dan Sheehan and Jack Morgan as outside bets.
That's it. There is a chance that he goes for Dan Sheehan as kind of his secondary captain.
Yeah.
I do think, though, because he's worked heavily with Itoje before, he's been to World Cup, he's been to Lions tours with him, Andy Farrell this is, that Itoje probably is the next cab off the rank. Yeah. And he's been on 2 Lions tours before, and he's the reigning man of the series, Itoje, so he's experienced, and I feel like he probably is the obvious name to go for, isn't he, if Doris is injured?
I think so. And I think now, as we sit with this hanging over us, I think you kind of make that decision regardless. Maybe I'm talking myself around a little bit here. I think Doris is in no matter what. We won't know the extent of his injury for a little while. So if there's a possibility he can play just the tests, I think he's good enough to be there. And then you watch him and you track him across. And then you maybe, give him that midweek game a few days before the tests, the first test, to see if he's up to fitness, even if you only give him 20 minutes off the bench and then 20 minutes in the series. I think that's fine. Yeah,
or if you stick him on the bench in the first test to bring him in the second, that could be an idea.
Yeah.
The question then becomes, I suppose, does this then free up a space for him to take an extra back rower?
Possibly.
If he's potentially leaving Doris at home to rehab for a bit of the tour.
Yeah. But also, we don't know how strictly they're set 20 numbers. We don't know if they're expecting a 37-player squad, we're expecting to take 38.
Yeah.
Does that mean...
Does that become 39?
39?
Yeah, if Doris can only play half the tour.
Or do they wait and announce that player once the extent of Doris's injury is known?
Yeah. Let's say that extra player, if an extra one comes in, would be Ben Earl.
It's Ben Earl that's Tulu Falatau, I think.
Yeah. Falatau's name's come up a lot.
Yeah, right? You then have Jack Cohn as the only specialist 8.
Yeah.
Ben Earl moved a about a bunch between both the back row positions and the
He's
centre.
such a good 8 though. He's such an unbelievable ball carrier, and his work rate's incredible. And his thing is, I don't want to sound like I'm criticising Faletau's work rate, because his work rate is very, very good. But Ben Earl is fitter than Faletau and can stay on the pitch longer than he can and make more physical impact at each ruck than Faletau can.
That Doris came through as a 6 and then moved into 8 for Farrell. It was Farrell's call to move him into 8. And does he look to do that with Curry or Morgan, who are both flankers, who have played 8, played plenty of 8, quite a lot.
Very good 8s, the pair of them.
Yeah. And he can go, well, actually, you just fit the mould better, and I'll move you.
I think he could do it with Ben Earl.
Yeah.
I think Ben Earl could make that step up very easily. I think he'd do very well on the tour games and then would be quite seamless stepping up to test level at 8.
Yeah.
He does it for England all the time, so...
I can see it being either Earl or Faletau that comes in. I think it's...
Personally, I would say Earl edges Faletau for Farrell.
I think so. I think you're probably right. I think Faletau's an interesting option. I think a lot of coaches would go for that just for the out-and-out number 8-ness of it.
Yeah.
But I think Farrell will be less concerned about that.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, back to us wrapping up the video. Yeah. That concludes the Lions squad that Andy Farrell is going to select tomorrow. Spoilers. We will be there reacting to the squad live on youtube.com.
When you say there, we'll be here.
We'll be here. We'll be in this spot, but we'll have chairs. We'll react to the squad live. We'll go live about half an hour or so before the squad's name, so around 1:30. We'll see you there.
Change our mind on Ben Earl in the meantime.
Yeah. If you've got any questions, anything, please send it in. If you've got any forfeits for any players we get wrong, please send those in as well, and we'll see
No dirty
what we
pints.
can get through. We couldn't possibly manage it in the time because we're going to get every single one of these players wrong. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you tomorrow for the Lions.
For the Lions.